I guess maybe because it was in part a visualization of a story that I may have, moved beyond the democratic process, and that didn't go down well.
Fragrance to flavors strange, a magnificent chain.
Pete said he was going to leave, and he did. And I remember talking to him on a plane one day. I said, "Are you seriously going to leave at the end of this?" I mean, he said, "Yeah, afraid so. Yeah, I made up my mind." And he's putting me on. It's all part of the act. It's all part of the show. It's like the makeup is going to come off. But no, it was not an act. It was real.
As I said many times, when Peter and I started off in the group as sort of, kind of very best friends, I suppose, really. And obviously by then it was getting a little more a little more difficult, I think, particularly within the group. So yes, it was a sort of sad time in that way. And you sort of felt that, particularly once we started, when we did the tour, we did about 100 shows of the Lamb, which wasn't a fantastic show, to be honest, I don't think. Although we tried very hard and had lots of good effects. It was trying to do the whole album, to an audiences who really wanted to hear a lot of the old hits, made it a little more difficult.
But it was a bit strange to be carrying on doing gigs knowing the singer was leaving. I must admit, it was a bit strange. Must have been strange, And then I think the last gig was cancelled, so the gig we were actually at became our last show. So that was a bit of anticlimax. There was no kind of build-up because the next show had been cancelled because no one bought tickets. Toulouse, we all disagree on where the last show is. It's incredible. I'm convinced that Toulouse was cancelled and we ended it with the five of us in Besançon. Everybody else tells me we ended in Saint-Etienne, but you'd think someone would know, wouldn't you? Apparently I'm wrong, but I'm pretty convinced I'm right. Anyway, the last show was cancelled, so that was the end of that.
I think I started to have some frustration of sort of not being part of the keyboard side of things, I have very strong ideas on how things should sound and how you mix things together, and so I think there may have been some frustrations in that department.
I think something happened when he left for a bit, and you're in your mind you're thinking, wait a minute, this guy's maybe he's going to pull somewhere else, different directions. He wants to think outside the band. And so when he finally did break the news, it was not such a huge shock. We had a kind of pre-warning, I just managed to persuade Tony Smith to leave his business and become a manager. Poor guy like that, suddenly, the singer leaves. And I'm sure he thought, oh God, what have I done? But it's funny. In a sense, talking about it now, you said it seems a long period. It's not a long period, you're right. But I'm talking about it now. I think a lot of tours, a lot of work, a lot of gigs, a lot of music in a sort of 5-year period, actually. I remember seeing once the list of gigs we did 1 year. It was like 190 or 200 in 1 year. No, 210 in 1 year. That's a lot of gigs. But it became a bit of a landmark album and an end of an era too, I think.
I mean, one of the several reasons why I left was because that I didn't feel able to control, or that I was in charge of my life, that, I could just look on the calendar and see exactly where I was going to be 18 months from today, and I never liked that feeling.
I have to say that there's been sort of little rumours on and off throughout the years that because of my apparent unhappiness at Pete's visuals, that I was either an instigator of him leaving, pleased that he left so I could sing, None of that is true, I love Peter to this day as if we've always been close. I played on his album, I played for him as his drummer for free, because he couldn't afford a band at one point. We did gigs when he was routining the third album. I love the guy, we went to his wedding and you came to mine. We all get on great, but I've always felt very, very close to Pete. And I was very sad when he left, but we had to get on with it. And I didn't want to be the singer at all, because I was the drummer. And by that point, I was a very good drummer. So why would I want to sing? We couldn't find anybody else. So if we couldn't find anybody else, that was the end of it. Or have someone that didn't really make the grade, So bit by bit, I ended up doing the singing. And but people always go take the short story. They take the shortest route, and they think Phil's the singer. He's had to go at Pete. He wanted him out.
It's bullshit. Phil, yeah, some people think, that Phil was sort of chomping at the bit, waiting to get rid of me. And it wasn't like that at all. I think he loved being a drummer, and although I think was beginning to write songs and enjoy being a singer, for quite some time the band didn't consider him as the singer, and I don't think he really considered himself as the singer for Genesis. So that evolved slowly. It was clear to me that he could have a big career on his own, and I remember saying that to him and to the rest of the band at the time, and because, as I said, we would often be there hammering out our own things, which were sounding quite different from what the band was doing. It wasn't. I never had the feeling that the band wanted to get rid of me at any time, and I think because we started the tour for the Lamb, and that got great reactions, people were hoping that things would all heal, and then we got to the Midwest of America, and it just got too much for me, and I just knew that I was drowning and had to head up for air.
I think it's looked upon now like in the same way that James Dean, only made 3 films, I think, 4 films, but everyone thinks he's a wonderful actor, and I think everyone looks back at The Lamb with a lot of reverence, but they didn't like it at the time. I think it was. But I'm glad that they got round to it now, but it didn't take the world by storm when it came out, that's for sure.
Musically, there was a confidence and an assurance about what we were doing as writers and players, more than on any other record up to that point. So, there were all these different sort of out of balance elements that ended up making what I think is a good record. There's 1 or 2 weak points where it sort of fizzled out in places, but some of our strongest work.
Yeah, the good bits are good. It was a long album to make. I think a double album is hard to do, especially if things aren't going quite right, like Pete leaving for a bit. And on reflection, I guess it had to be that way. Peter wrote all the lyrics. You couldn't mix it up, but it made it. His work there very, very hard, and I think I took him away from us really, and sort of he just got into a space and just worked on lyrics, and did some great lyrics, but it's still quite. It's slightly made us two camps, so to speak. But a good way to end, I think,
Well, I can listen to it without rancor, and I don't remember the pain. I just can enjoy it as a piece of music now, and say, I think it was a clever album. Lots of great keyboard work, not so many opportunities for the guitar to shine, but where it does, I think it's interesting. I tend to think that it parallels, doing Topographic Oceans at that point, a double concept album, and us doing a double album, and I know that very often the guys have felt that maybe it would have made a great single album if the best stuff had been kept. But what would you have kept? What would you have thrown away? Kept my bit, of course. To hell with all the rest.
No, I think it's great that we went out on a good piece of work. And there was never really bad feeling with the individuals. That we had, like any sort of divorce, there was difficulties, but most of what they wanted, I was prepared to give them, including extra touring time and my tape archive, most of the equipment and stuff. And so it was, at that point, I think they were worried whether they'd be able to continue without me. And clearly they were much more successful without me. So there was actually no real issue. But I think everyone had doubts and were very frustrated because we worked a long time to get some success. We were about to get some financial rewards, which we hadn't fully paid off. So when this bastard goes and sabotages the whole thing just as it gets successful, that wasn't a popular thing to do from a career point of view.
I think it's quite a difficult album. It's very dark and quite dense. But I think, therefore, people sort of, I think people, if you try at it, it still works really well, I think, and I think it's rewarding, and perhaps it takes a little bit more to get into it in the first place, and maybe for that reason, people, once they've got there, hold it up like that. But I think, in honesty, that's the thing about Genesis. Is a strange thing. We don't have any one album that everyone's going to say this is the one. Pink Floyd have got Dark Side of the Moon, whatever. With us, you'll get people saying any album. I've had every album said this is the one, part possibly from Genesis Revelation. I think it's just how you hear things. Sometimes it's at what point in your life you hear a thing, and you're a teenager or something that hits you harder when you're sort of 15 than it does perhaps when you're sort of 25, and so it stays with you for that reason.